What is up, everybody? Welcome on in to the First Round Fantasy Podcast. I am your host tonight, Jacob Bartley, joined by Justin Moe. How you doing, Justin? It's the regular season's over. Fantasy playoffs are here. How you feeling, man?
Dude, was I nervous, man. I had a couple games coming down to the wire, and I lost them both, but I still made the playoffs, fortunately, due to other games. So,
Yeah.
3 for 3. It's a long season, and this week just became way more difficult with all the issues. So, it's going to be an interesting playoff. I really think, I don't care if you're first seed or last, everyone can win this year.
Oh, yeah. Anyone can win this year. There was just like the NFL, a lot of fantasy standings were clustered with 5-6, 6-5. A lot of those type of records. And a lot of people didn't know if they were going to make it to the playoffs until Monday night or Sunday during the day. So it was pretty exciting coming down to it. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about today. Of course, we're going to do our Fool's Gold and Dark Horses later on. Basically, our start sit segment here at First Round Fantasy. But real quick, we kind of touched on it. How did you perform this season? Did you overall? Are you satisfied with your performance? Are you disappointed?
I'm disappointed this year, to be honest.
Yeah.
I played 3 leagues, 10 men. I placed first, fifth, and sixth, or sixth and sixth. So I
Well,
just
you
had
made it
that.
in the playoffs in all three.
I mean, listen,
Not
if
good
you want,
enough.
it's not good enough. If you know my track record, it's just not good
Yeah.
enough. I told myself, this year I'm not going to sleep on running backs. I usually don't care about the new up and comers. I sleep on all the rookies. I sleep on all the backups that steal time. And I said, this year, no more. I went out on a limb. I got Michael Carter. I had some other picks, but I just between being busy and can't keep track, and then I don't want to drop players that definitely should have been dropped.
Yeah.
It locks me up, and then I'm like, dude, my bench is super weak, and it shouldn't have been. So I think the lesson learned is stop hanging on to those whatever wide receivers in PPR and just let them loose. But lesson learned for another year. So we'll try to get back at it. But I made the playoffs. Hopefully, I can do work. But what about you? How do you feel?
Yeah. So, and I know what you mean. Even though you made the playoffs, you're not completely satisfied with those performances. You might not feel great about your 6 seed teams going in. I had a pretty good year, all things considered. I'm playing 8 Yahoo leagues, and 3 of them are just random public leagues that I don't know anybody in. So I don't really care about those. I'm currently in a playoffs in that one, and I have the buy, so that's cool. But it's only like $100, reward. The 5 leagues that we play in with all our buddies, I made the playoffs 4 out of those 5. But the thing is, the 2 leagues that have been going on the longest and that I care about the most, Beer Drinkers Unite, which you're in, and then the Pick Six Keeper League, I crushed everybody all year. Both my teams 11-3. No one else within 2 games of me. I had that number 1 seed locked up real early, and this is my best year because I don't remember ever just being so relaxed week 1 because I have those bye weeks. So now in my 2 dynasty leagues, I have a match. I barely made the playoffs in those 6 seed in both actually. And I'm like, my team is falling apart in those leagues. Injuries, those are super flexes. So it's hard to fill that second quarterback position if you don't have Josh Allen and Justin Herbert like some people. So I'm very satisfied overall. I did really good in, redraft. So overall, pretty good year. But man, that we have the Rio League, which we call it. I can never catch a break in that league. I think I may have made the playoffs the first year, and I haven't made the playoffs since. I don't know what it is with that league. I have such bad luck. I started 3-0, and then went 1-10 the
Mhm.
rest of the season. To be fair, I lost Derrick Henry. Antonio Gibson was terrible for the first half of the season. I traded Eckler for Hopkins like an idiot. So, yeah, it was just a bad year, but for that league. But overall, feel pretty good about it. But we'll see, man. These playoffs are so stressful. It's like we shouldn't care as much as we do, but we all get butt hurt when we lose, and it's just it's terrible.
Hey man, it all comes down to this. This is why we play. So this is the time tinker with your lineup if you haven't. There's still some notable free agents, which we'll talk about, that are worth grabbing. So it's not late to make changes. This week by week, everything switches up. And
if anything, some of my leagues, this is like my most important waiver wire week, honestly, for some of my leagues. So
yeah, I made a nice waiver wire pickup I'll talk about, but I think he should have been rostered everywhere. But we'll see.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's there are a lot of injury stuff going on, a lot of COVID-19 related stuff going on. There's no way we can cover it all. So there are a few things though that I do want to talk about, and one of them, and it's not always somebody being injured. Maybe it's somebody coming back from injury. And that first thing is Michael Carter of the New York Jets. This guy was starting to put it together right before he got injured. The few weeks before he got injured, he was starting to look really, really nice for fantasy. And obviously he got injured. He goes on IR, and then we kind of forget about him, right? But he's coming back, and he could be a contributor to your team. I don't really have him in that many. Like, I had him in one league and I traded him away. So I don't have any stock in Michael Carter, but how do you feel about him coming back? Do you think he's startable right away?
As someone who has stock in him and dealing with injuries and dealing with other problems that people are sending out, I've been waiting since he got injured for him to come back. It's not like he was popping off or anything, but listen, if you get a running back that gets 15 plus carries, 12 even at this level, I'm good with it. He's also getting some pass catching. So he's honestly, I have James Robinson. I don't know if he's going to play, but even that they're playing Houston, I don't know what's going on in Jacksonville, but I would start Michael Carter off the bat over James Robinson. And I know I'm not alone in that, because I look at other people's roster and running back is thin. So anyone coming back, I'm sure, is going to be helpful.
Absolutely. And you're not lying. Running back is thin. In our dynasty league, I'm down McCaffrey. Is Eckler going to play? I might be down Eckler. My only healthy running back is Najee Harris, and I'm going to have to start one of these guys like Zach Moss or Dearness Johnson. That's what I'm coming down to for a playoff matchup. Like, I'm not even kidding. I have no choice. So I wish I had Michael Carter in that league. And if you look, he played 11 weeks. He only 4 of those 11 weeks, he was under 10 fantasy points.
I'll take that.
Yeah. And then on top of that, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, he's over 14 fantasy points. And he had a 14 game performance, 16 points, 32 points in week 8, 18 points, and this is full PPR. So, we talked about him a lot in the offseason coming into the year as a potential sleeper, and he was performing really well. So, I hope nobody dropped Michael Carter. By now, people must have checked and picked him up by then. But yeah, I would feel comfortable, especially if you're hurting, picking him up for sure. One major thing that we just got news about today is that DeAndre Hopkins is expected to miss the rest of the season with the leg injury. Obviously, Hopkins is out, so that hurts people who are hoping he can come back and be in their starting lineups for the playoffs. But do you think that any Cardinals player is, a must start with Hopkins going down?
You mean the wide receivers?
Any Cardinals pass catcher, I should say, and I'm not counting the running backs.
I can't start Kirk because he just doesn't do much off the bat. Moore is like a wild card. I kind of rather start Rondell over him, but even so, it's not exciting because he has duds as well a lot often. I stay away. I think it's going to cause Kyler to do a lot, and they already depend on James Conner, who also got banged up. So I stay away. I think there are better options if you really had to go off the waiver to get him and you don't have a bench. I'd stay away unless you want to go crazy off the bat, hope for a big bust. They're playing Detroit. I might go Rondell Moore for kind of like a Van Jefferson play where he gets a 70-yard touchdown, but he doesn't really do that anyways, except for 1 week. So it's not exciting.
Yeah, I mean, any of those guys can go off any game. I mean, in AJ Green, Rondell Moore, Christian Kirk, but you can't depend on them to be a foundation of your lineup. They're that last flex you throw in, hoping for a random 20-point game. But I do think Zach Ertz at this point is a reliable tight end. I mean, you're not starting him over the main guys, but you can do a lot worse at tight end than Zach Ertz. He's been playing well since he's been in Arizona. So I think not that Hopkins being out directly gives targets to Ertz, but it allows more targets available for everybody. So I definitely, of course, Zach Ertz is rostered everywhere, but if you're deciding between him and some other guys that maybe we're going to talk about later, you might want to swing to Ertz because we know Hopkins is going to be missing. One other major thing, and there's not much to say about this. The Browns have put a lot of players on the COVID-19 list, including Baker Mayfield, including Jarvis Landry. As of right now, Nick Chubb and Dearness Johnson aren't on the COVID-19 list. We could see Case Keenum starting. Justin, what do people do here if they're looking at any Browns pass catcher?
I don't know who you're starting before that. None of them should really be started. Maybe if you like Landry, he has some PPR play, but outside of that, I'm not really interested in any Browns player. Nick Chubb is a start if he plays no matter what.
Of course, yeah.
Other than that, I'm not really sure who I'd play. Case Keenum is not making my starting lineup at all. Not worth the pickup to me. But I want to keep an eye out because it's not too late for some people to come back, but it might actually be a little too late. We'll see. No, I don't want to start People Jones, Rashad Higgins. It's just ugly over there. Maybe I want to go Hooper or Njoku, whichever one's out there, but it's still a throw in there, It's just not exciting.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Let me ask you this. So Kareem Hunt is going to be out again. Yeah, I believe he has an ankle injury. So Dearness Johnson, we've seen this where the second running back on the Browns it has flex value. With potentially some of the receivers out and Kareem Hunt out. Do you think with his pass catching ability, Dearness Johnson could be maybe a flex option and maybe he lines up and runs some routes?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but I think it's sub 20% that happens. He only really did work when he got the bell cow shirt. Yeah.
The full work. Yeah. When Chubb was out, basically.
And it's not like Hunt's been playing every week and now he's out. He's been out for a good amount of time. So I'm not really too interested in flexing Ernest at all. It doesn't scream Pollard to me. It doesn't scream even Gainwell to me. So I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe I was remembering wrong because his only really standout performance in the passing game was week 10 when he had 8 targets, 7 catches for 58 yards, which is solid along with his 19 rushes for 99 yards, but it was only 1 week. So maybe he's not as prolific in the passing game as I thought, but we know he's capable. So I think there's a possibility there. Like I said, with all those running backs out, I might be throwing Dearness Johnson into my lineup this week in the Dynasty League. So, if you are,
you got to do.
If you're doing it, you're not alone. All right, so let's move on to our favorite waiver wire pickups, and I'll start with Dearness Johnson since we were just talking about him. Look, I just talked about it. I was looking at my matchups. Okay, I could be down Eckler this week, so I put my waiver claim in. I got Dearness Johnson. I think, at this point, there's not a lot of options available. So I think he has to be rostered because what if, look, with the COVID-19 situation, at any time, any player can go on the COVID-19 list. So it's not like an injury where injuries maybe don't happen as often as people are going on to the COVID-19 list. Like this can just happen anywhere, out of nowhere to any player, even if they're not out at practice or something, right? So that means a guy like Dearness Johnson should be rostered because what if Nick Chubb goes on the COVID-19 list, which he's already been on before? Suddenly, he's a must start, possibly top 10 play this week. So I thought he was a must pickup. What about you? Do you have any must pickups this week? I know waivers have passed, but you never know. There's always some guys out there lingering still.
Yeah, Dearness should have been held regardless if you're the Chubb owner, but I like Rashad Penny, and I looked at the stats. We do it a day later than average people, so he had a 52% bump up, which put him at like 20% prior to the waivers, so I'm happy people picked him up. But me and Gabe talked about him. I think he was down to roll the dice. I wasn't really down to roll the dice because I've seen his track record, and I was wrong. He had a freaking good game, and Carroll said, why should it stop? So why should I not play him? So if I have Rashad as an option, I definitely want to pick him up. But as I hinted before when we spoke about wide receiver possibilities to pick up and very undervalued and has a potential for a nice week, in my opinion, that's Amon St. Brown, who's sitting at a 19% rostered. And I know you love him. I've been talking about him specifically in
Yeah.
Dynasty. I think the dude has came across as the number one over there in Detroit, and especially if Hawk doesn't play, that means even more targets for him. For example, the last 2 weeks, Amon Ra is sitting at 12 targets each week, and Hawk didn't play last week, but he played before, so it's telling me that it's great without Hawk, but it's still as good with Hawk. It doesn't bother him. So for example, I'm struggling to fill a flex spot. I don't want to flex Jacoby Myers. I don't want to flex anybody like Rondell Moore, Kurt that we spoke about. I'm sticking with Mr. Target on a team that's playing Arizona. And this is the matchup I like. Arizona just lost a tough loss last night or 2 nights ago to the Rams. They're going to come out for blood, and Detroit doesn't have any strength to stop that. So they're going to go down big. Goff's going to have to throw. Amon-Ra's going to catch the ball. That's my favorite pickup this week from a flyer point of view. If you need that fill-in, and hey, I'm hoping he gets 680 and a touchdown and gets me that win as the low seed in a playoff game. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of fantasy managers like us in certain leagues are desperate, and they're guys maybe you wouldn't have picked up in the middle of the season, but right now you can put them to use. And I think another one of those guys is Gabriel Davis of the Buffalo Bills. He has been coming on lately. I mean, his last 2 games in full PPR, 11 fantasy points, 15 fantasy points. He had a touchdown in each. He's not necessarily getting a lot of receptions. I mean, he had 8 targets last week for 5 catches, but he gets those big plays. He gets those touchdowns. Josh Allen looks for him in the red zone. And to me, it's like either way, if a player's getting it done, he's getting you fantasy points, then he's eligible to be considered in your flex. So I do like Gabriel Davis. Ever since week 8, he's had a 12-point fantasy game, 13 points, 11, 15. So I think he's kind of coming into his own. Emmanuel Sanders has kind of fell off a little bit there. So maybe Davis can emerge as the number 2 behind Diggs. I think that's coming. Maybe not fully this year, but I think it's coming.
I like him. I think he needs to get somewhere else. There's just so many mouths to feed, especially with Knox coming up. He's super talented, but Beasley's still there. Don't forget.
Yeah, I know. He's a target hog. Gio has stopped by. Gio Ramos. What up, Gio? Gio says, I need Chubb to produce RB1 numbers during these playoffs. Hey, not to crap on anybody's team, but you know who he's playing in the week 1 of the playoffs? The Las Vegas Raiders, and it is a juicy matchup. So I'm honestly, and maybe this is biased because I need it. I'm hoping him and Dearness Johnson have a good week, honestly. But yeah, and our third podcast mate Gabriel also stops by. Says he will be Gio. He will be. Thank you guys for stopping by. Yeah, and another one real quick, and I know this is weird, but if you're really, really desperate for running back, take a look at Royce Freeman. I believe all of the other Houston running backs are in danger of missing this game. They're either on the COVID list or suffering injury. Last week, Royce Freeman put up 12 fantasy points. He had, he did it mostly in the passing game, but still, they're going up against Jacksonville. If he's going to get a big workload, he can be one of these throwing guys that, hey, I know it sounds gross, starting Royce Freeman playing on the Houston Texans, but you got to do what you got to do.
Listen, if you told me right now your second best running back will get you 12 points, will you bench it and start that player? I'd accept that 12 points without even thinking. It's like that this year. It's really
exactly.
Like
yeah, and either you start somebody random and you take a risk of like 0, or maybe they get 30, or take those 12 points, because that can be the difference in whether you win or not, and getting a donut from one of these guys.
James Robinson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I shouldn't be mad at him. It's Urban Meyer, dude. I never seen a team come out so hard and just basically hate their coach. It's hilarious almost. If he stays after this year, I'm just going to be shocked. I don't think there's a chance he stays for another year.
Yeah, they're wasting Trevor Lawrence's years, man. This guy needs to get going.
Oh, yeah.
So Gabe, we kind of talked about this. Gabe says, who is the better receiver to have in Arizona, Moore, Kirk, Green? I'm personally going to lean Christian Kirk just because he's been there the longest. He has chemistry with Kyler Murray. We've seen him explode for big games. I'm leaning Kirk. Justin, you said Moore, right?
No. I said I take a flyer on them. It's not
Yeah.
sexy, but honestly, I go AJ Green just because
Yeah.
he's actually a good receiver, a little past his prime. But with Hopkins out, I'm assuming he takes that slot, meaning the better plays are going to go his way. So PPR, all in all, I'd rather have AJ Green.
Nice. And Gio says, I just dropped Royce for Davis. He probably heard me talk about Gabriel Davis and then went and picked him up. And then I start talking about Royce Freeman. But hey, you must have needed a wide receiver more than you needed a running back. So I'm guessing that's probably not a bad move for you for sure. All righty. It's time to move into our dark horses. And these are basically our must starts of the week or our sleeper starts of the week, however you want to call it. This is our version of it here at First Round Fantasy. We call them our dark horses. And before we talk about our choices for this week, we are going to review last week's choices. And Justin might be excited to talk about this. First up, Justin, you went with your man, Greg Joseph. We all laughed. We all said, what? What is Justin doing? Gabe couldn't compose himself on the podcast. He was laughing so much. And honestly, I was like, hey, when you told me about that, I was like, that's pretty cool because we never choose a kicker for a dark horse or a fool's gold. I think it would be really hard to choose a kicker as a fool's gold, but that was a bold movement. And you said 12 fantasy points or more, and he got 13. So that's a hit. How you feeling?
Oh man, it was really shady because I was watching the game and he missed, and then he missed an extra point. I'm like, oh my god! Not only am I wrong, but I'm gonna get ragged for it. But then the Vikings had a nice week. The guy got some nice long kicks in, and he saved the day. So although I like 13, I was right. I wanted to see 16, 17, but it would have been epic if that happened. But like I said, hey, 12 plus points for a kicker, you're going to take that week to week. So there we go. My boy, Greg Joseph. I told you. Did you hear what I told Gabe last week?
That the Vikings were going to smash the Steelers?
Yeah, we were right. But also his nickname, man, I'm calling it first. Greg the Leg
Greg
Jr.
DeLay, the new Greg DeLay 2.0?
No, Junior. He's not even close to being 2.0. He has to do this for at least 3 more years to even be considered.
Hey, I mean, it was a good call. You got the process right because I think you mentioned this, but like, remember he started the game with a missed field goal and a missed extra point, right? So if you count those points, he would have had 17.
That's what I'm saying.
Or maybe more depending on the length of the field goal. So
the logic was definitely there and it played out. I was looking like a freaking clairvoyant, but anyone that watched that game and Zimmer, I think he said Vikings first half beat any team in the league. Vikings second half lose to any team in the league. So it was just a crazy game, but he showed up. Good for him.
I couldn't believe how close the Steelers were to coming back in that game. Remember, I texted you. I was like, "Hey, who do you think's going to win this game?" And you said the Vikings are going to crush them. I was like, "Oh wow, that's a bold statement." And they looked like it, but dude, that pass to Pat Freiermuth, I thought he was going to grab that. I thought he had that.
You can't really get closer than that. I mean, that was nuts.
And but Ben looked clutch in that game, at least in the second half.
Yeah, it was a tale of two halves. Luckily, we had Mr. Dalvin Cook to throw us over the top real quick, so I'm happy for that.
Awesome.
And then KJ Osborne.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
I was happy to see that.
Yeah, that was a monster catch. He went flying. So he's also someone that should be looked up to get because Thielen's going to be out. That's actually true. I'd rather have Osborne than Amon-Ra maybe, but both are good.
Yeah, it's funny. In one of my random Yahoo leagues, I was like, I had no receivers. All my receivers were injured or out. And I started KJ Osborne, but then I also started Marquez Valdes-Scantling, which is interesting because that was Gabe's dark horse of the week last week. And I was very happy with the KJ Osborne performance. But on those two random receivers to start, like those are my starting wide receivers, but I had no choice.
Dude, this is fantasy football 2021. I'm not even surprised, to be honest.
Yeah. But unfortunately, Gabe, that was a miss. Love you, buddy, but he only had 5 points. But I think you were thinking right. And he has kind of emerged as the go-to number 2 with Randall, especially with Randall Cobb out. But you did miss that one. But let's get into it this week. Justin, you You already talked about this guy. He's been a dark horse for you before. Who is your dark horse for Week 15 or the first round of the playoffs?
I'm putting all my eggs in this boy's basket, Mr. Amon-Ra. I mean, like I already said, they play Arizona. They're going to get smashed. They're going to have to throw just because they want to stay somewhat competitive. The only person that's going to be catching right for them is Amon. So similar to the other receivers we've spoken about, matchups are huge. And I don't know if this is done really. Maybe it's next level analytics, but the Bills play the Jags, so Stefan's going to get 2 touchdowns. How often do we do that? But we don't really look at, this team's going to get smoked. Throw the ball nonstop to catch up. Wide receivers are going to feast. I've been doing that. It's kind of hitting for me. So I think the same thing for Amon-Ra. And if Swift and Hawkinson's out, even better.
Yeah, it's a good call, especially, I'm not counting on Swift and Hawkinson playing in the leagues that I have him in. I'm gonna have to pick up a tight end in the league that I have TJ Hawkinson in, but Swift is basically a receiver in his own right, and he gets a lot of targets. So who else are they gonna throw to? They got the boy Josh Reynolds there too. He knows Jared Goff. They played together for multiple years, but you and I have been high on Amon-Ra all year, and I think he's talented enough. He just needs that opportunity and better quarterback play. But even from bad quarterback play, you could still get a receiver producing. So that is a good call, Justin. I hope it hits this time, man. I hope it hits.
I need it, man. I really do.
Yeah, and that's one of those, like, if it actually hits in a playoff match, and you're just over the moon. So I hope we're back next week talking good things about him.
I can't wait.
Yeah, we shall see. I'm going with the running back for my dark horse this week, and I love this guy. His name is Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots, and I think people have kind of been disappointed in him in the past 3 weeks, and I don't blame them. He had 8 points, 4 points, 7 points. But if you look a little deeper than that, he had, in a game that was very close, the Patriots led, I think, the whole game or most of the game. It was very close, though. He had 24 carries for 78 yards, and this is with Damian Harris in the game. Damian Harris has been kind of banged up all year. He's questionable unless they announce that he's good to go. But either way, whether Damian Harris plays or not, I think, like we talked about, people are desperate for running back plays. And I think this man is a guy you can throw. Look, I'm starting him as one of my starting running backs in a matchup this week. It's just come down to that. And they're playing Indianapolis, which isn't the best matchup for running backs. But my point is, I think this is going to be another game kind of like the game against the Bills. I think the Patriots are going to want to monitor the clock, and they're going to use their running backs to do so. Even though he had 24 carries for a disappointing 78 yards, it's all about the opportunity. He got those opportunities. I think he's going to see that again. Maybe not 24 carries, but if he gets 18 carries, I'm good with that. He could possibly turn that into 100 or more yards. And he's very, very capable in the passing game. Ever since James White has gone down, they use Brandon Bolden, they use Stevenson. They don't really use Damian Harris that much in the passing game. So I love this guy. If you've watched him play, he's explosive. He has so much energy. I love him. So I'm going with Rhamondre Stevenson for my dark horse in the week 1 of the playoffs.
I like that. I really do. I'm worried that they play the Colts, but I like that.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see. It's not – that's the whole point, right? Taking somebody that maybe everybody's not starting and explaining why we can consider them as a start, just like you did with Amon-Ra and I did with Rhamondre Stevenson. All right, so let's get into our Fool's Gold for Week 15. And this is our guys that we're either saying, hey, you might want to bench this guy if you have a better option, or we're at least saying limit your expectations for these players. But before we get to our ones for this week, let's recap last week. So Gabe went with Jerry Jeudy, and normally Gabe is rooting for Jerry Jeudy and choosing him as his dark horse. This week he chose him as his Fool's Gold, and he hit on that one. Jeudy had roughly 9 fantasy points, didn't do nothing great. He said he was going to be under, I think he said he was going to be under 12 or 13 fantasy points, and he hit that right on the mark. Justin, you went with T. Higgins. Didn't necessarily work out. I think you missed this one. How are you feeling about that?
I feel good because I like T Higgins, but I feel bad because
Yeah.
my analytics was slightly off. He
I
didn't
don't
have a.
think you ever said bench him necessarily.
I did say temper your expectations, but
Yeah.
still, 16 points. I think you take it, and I think the good news moving forward is that Burrow said, "I can't wait to play with him for 10 years." He's moving up to an elite receiver. I kind of want to know what Burrow thinks about Jamar Chase then, because that uh, I love both of them. I wish they were spread out so we can get some more beastly plays out of all of them. But good for Higgins. I missed on it. Oh well. Next time I might get it right, but it's hard calling those. He's a big time player, man.
Yeah, no, it's not like we're rooting against these guys, but look, this is the way we set up our show, so we have to choose somebody, right? And I always struggle with the fool's gold because you're predicting failure, right? And that's it's a lot more fun to predict success, I think.
You're a Niner fan. You watched the game. How did he truly perform? Were they planning against him more or planning against Chase more?
I just think the Niners are playing everybody tough right now. They're fighting for their lives every single game, and basically every game's a must win. Uh, I don't know. I feel like they couldn't, even Boyd got going a little bit. He didn't have a great game, but he was productive. So you can't stop all three of those guys. It's just tough. And that's interesting because Boyd's already signed, to a long-term deal. And they have Higgins and Chase for a while before they even have to think about re-signing them. So I think it's going to be like that for a while. And Burrow's one of those guys that hypes his boys up. He basically, told the Bengals like we got to draft Jamar Chase, and
I
that's
think
good though. I like Burrow. He's
I,
a good guy.
I think what we see is what we're gonna get. Boyd's unfortunately taking a very deep back seat to what we know he can do, and then Higgins or Chase can go off, but both will do well on average. So that's just who the Bengals will be now. They're a good team. They've turned it around quite a bit. Couple tough losses, but yeah, I think it will work. All of them on the same team.
Yeah, for sure. And no, I actually listened to that game when I was driving, so it was hard. I didn't really see a lot of the plays, but
Mm.
he did well. I mean, I remember when him and Chase were performing, I was thinking about you because you were talking about how you think Chase is going to perform and T Higgins isn't. And I mean, you got the Chase part right for sure.
Yeah,
All right, so let's get into our fool's gold for this week. You chose a running back this week, Justin. Who do you got?
I got to go with the guy that no one will probably bench based off needs, but David Montgomery. He's can be really good. He can be not so good. He seems to have turned into a bell cow that's kind of touchdown dependent. It's weird because I'm looking at his stats and he only really pops off with the touchdown. They play the Vikings. The Vikings are middle of the road basically against the run. I just think this is my logic. The Vikings had a real beautiful first half against Pittsburgh. They saw what worked. We lost the week prior to the Niners, right? I think so. Anyways,
Yeah,
we're
you
we're on
did.
that. The Vikings are on the outside looking in, and the last thing they want to do is lose to a division team and lose their chance for a playoff. So I think the Vikings are going to come out killing it. They'll be forced to pass. They're going to focus mostly on David Montgomery to contain him because when Montgomery goes, that team kind of has a very decent offense, as weird as that sounds to say about the Bears, but they've gotten better as the season's progressed. I just think we're going to focus in on him, and it's not going to be very good for him. So temper your expectations. He's set for 15. I'm going to say sub 13 is where I have him.
Nice, nice. And like you said, we're talking about starting guys like Dearness Johnson, and so I doubt anybody and Ramondre Stevenson. I doubt anybody's benching David Montgomery, but sometimes we're choosing guys that you're for sure going to start, but don't expect a huge game out of them is what we're saying. But man, luckily the one matchup I have, if you're right, the one matchup I have David Montgomery and I have a bye. So if you're right, I hope it's this week, and then I hope he does well the rest of the fantasy playoffs for sure.
Let's see.
Yeah. So all right, I had trouble finding a fool's gold this week, but I'm gonna go with a risky one. I think this is risky because this guy can blow up anytime, and I'm going with the tight end. I'm going with Kyle Pitts. And look, Kyle Pitts has been a disappointment from the hype of that everybody had for him, right? But I think we just need to take a deep breath. We have a lot of hype around him in Dynasty. If you drafted him in Dynasty, don't worry. He's going to have a great career. But this year has just been disappointing to the point where, like, nobody talked about Pat Freiermuth coming into the year, and he was the second tight end drafted in the second round by the Steelers. And to the point where it's like, you might want to start Pat Freiermuth over Kyle Pitts, which is insane. So Pitts has been disappointing this year so far, like I said, but also they are playing the San Francisco 49ers this week. And in full PPR, the 49ers have been the 30th. So basically they're third against tight ends. So tight ends are the 30th worst against them. So tight ends do not do well against the 49ers. And Kyle Pitts gets solid targets. He's getting 8, 6, 7, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 6, but he's just getting yards with them, right? He's had one touchdown this year in week 5. So it's not like he's been killing it in the red zone. He had his one explosion game was week 7 where he had 163 yards. He hasn't really done much. And it's crazy to me because he's such a physical beast. And it's like, how is his skill set not just translating and producing yards, touchdowns, fantasy points? And it's just not happening for some reason. And couple that with the tough matchup, I actually have him and Pat Freiermuth in a league, and I'm going back and forth. I can't decide which one to start, and it's actually like it's a really tough decision. And that could be the difference between whether I win or not. And it's like, I know Kyle Pitts is capable for going off for 30, but I feel confident that Pat Freiermuth is going to get me 12. So I'm torn, but all I'll say is you might have a better option at tight end than Kyle Pitts this week. What do you think, man?
On one hand, I hear you. On the other hand, as much as we talk about how running back's been a mess, tight end is still a disgusting cesspool.
That's
as always.
true.
And if I told you that he's 5th in PPR right now, no one would believe me.
Yeah.
I didn't believe it. It's just the state of the tight end. So what I do like about him is that he's doing this type of work without touchdowns. He only has 1 on the year. Matt Ryan is probably fallen off more than freaking Ben Roethlisberger and Phillip Rivers of last year. Side note, I think Deshaun Watson should go to Atlanta and let them have a high-powered offense if he gets back. But
that would be crazy.
If you're saying, hey, I'm putting 50 that Freiermuth gets a touchdown and Pitts doesn't, I wouldn't blame you. And that's what tight end at this point is. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone who's going to bench Pitts, but, hey, if you got a Freiermuth option or you got a Schultz or you got a Ertz, maybe.
Yeah, I just think at this point in the year, yes, tight end is disgusting, but at this point of the year, some guys have no tight ends, right? Like they're just streaming every week. And some teams, you can't make trades, right? So some teams have Zach Ertz and Kyle Pitts. Some teams have Freiermuth and Pitts, Schultz and Pitts. And a lot of times you don't want to put 2 tight ends in your lineup. Do you go with Pitts because it's a sexy name, or do you go with a guy that maybe could perform better and has been performing better?
If I need a 25-point plus game, I go Pitts. If I need a steady, solid number, I'll probably pivot.
Nice. And look, I'm a big fan of Kyle Pitts. I hope I'm wrong, but I think he's going to be a disappointment this week. So we'll see. I'm going to say under 12 fantasy points for Kyle Pitts. I think that will be pretty disappointing. I do see some comments in the chat. Keep them going. We'll end the show with some questions. So I know you responded already in the chat, Justin, but we'll bring up Gio's question here. So Gio says, am I crazy for starting both Kittle and Gronk? Oh, I was just talking about starting 2 tight ends during these playoffs. Other secondary flex options are Gaskin, Julio, Gage, and Hilton.
God.
Yeah. Look, this is how gross stuff is getting right now. I don't think you're crazy, to be honest, because I've had to do that in a couple leagues, and it's not like you want to do it. You're not doing it because you're like, oh, I'm going to show that I'm smart. I'm going to start 2 tight ends. Like it's not because of that. It's because you're just trying to get the most out of your lineup as possible. And look, I don't feel good about Gaskins, Julio. I kind of like Russell Gage. I think I would maybe go maybe Gage over Gronk, but you're definitely starting Kittle if he's healthy. But I wouldn't blame you for looking at Gronk over some of those other guys.
I mean, All right, Philip Lindsay, C19. Savad Ahmed, C19. Gaskin, if he plays, only has, I think, Duke Johnson, but he also has C19. So I don't know if Gaskin's my running back, I'm gonna start him over Gronk. But I rather start Gronk over the other guys he mentioned. It's tough. That's a
So
weak start.
Gaskin is also on the C19 list, but he is fully vaccinated, so he could play.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if he
Yeah.
has no competition, then I rather start him.
Oh, absolutely. And he's had up and down year, but still, you
Yeah,
gotta roll with them.
I rather just start him because he has blow up potential. But Gronk is also a 2D TD type of tight end, so he also has blow up potential. Yeah, it's matchups probably at that point, but
Yeah, keep your eye on it. Like Justin said, if Gaskin is the only guy there, you got to go with Gaskin. Or even if one other guy's activated with Gaskin, you got to go Gaskin, in my opinion.
I'm surprised though. Shout out to Gio. Usually the man has a solid roster. What kind of flexes are you playing with, man? Tell me it's a 15-man league.
I'm wondering what
Just
league
play.
this is. I can't think off the top of my head. Is it the Beers League? I don't know. I think he has kill in that league, but who knows? I know he plays in a couple other leagues outside of that.
You want an interesting stat?
What's that?
Freaking George Kittle, who's missed how many games, is tight end 3 on the year. I can't believe it. Just insane.
Oh my, yeah. I mean, he's really that's an interesting stat. I didn't know that, but it just shows how dire tight end is, but also how good George Kittle is because he's what is the last 2 or 3 games he's been killing it. Yeah,
The monster, and it makes me sad. Shout out to the Raider Gabe fan Waller, man. I really missed him this year.
dude, I miss Waller too. I had him in one league, and I just like I never draft Waller, and I finally had him in one league, and it just been disappointing, but not his fault. You know,
It
he's
always
been
works
injured.
out like that, you know.
Yeah, and hey, at least our boy Hunter Renfro is benefiting from.
Ooh, dude,
is
imagine
benefiting
if
from
I
it.
took my own advice and picked him up week 2 and week 3. The dude is a monster. I love him. I'm
Yeah,
drafting him next year early. I hope everybody knows that.
Yeah, so I am in love with Hunter Renfro because Gabe and I we play in a 12-team dynasty league, right? And rosters are thin because it's all spread out. And it's hard. There's basically no one ever on the waiver wire. And I don't know what week it was. Maybe I can find out. But anyways, it was like in the first 5 weeks of the season, I picked up Hunter Renfro off the waiver wire. He was just sitting there. And I've been riding that wave. I changed my team name to like something that's referencing Hunter Renfro. I love it. And it's a dynasty league. So, hey, hopefully he continues this for years to come. And I think he's only 27 or so. So, yeah, he's a PPR beast.
I love him. I love him.
Yeah. Justin, did you have any other, start sit questions? Any other things you were debating in some of your fantasy lineups?
No, I think we covered it. A lot of tough running back and last flex decisions to make. My only advice is don't start LaVisca no matter what. There are better options.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm done with LaVisca. I'm done with Kenny Golladay. Those are the type of guys you're like referencing. Like you hold on to them for way too long, and they're so disappointing.
I think he has potential, but not this year.
Nice. Oh, we got another one of Gabe's burner accounts. No, no, we got Ronnie Daniel in the chat.
What up, Ronnie?
Maybe we'll end the show with this unless we get another question. So Ronnie says, "What's good, fellas? I'm playing in the toilet bowl next week.
Ooh.
Josh Allen versus Pats or Dak versus Washington football team, full PPR."
Spicy.
That is interesting. Honestly, okay. So Josh Allen is questionable, I believe. Let me check on that. Yeah, he's still questionable. He had a limited practice today with the foot injury. So you got to keep your eye on that. But all things considered, I have Josh Allen in one league. I also have Jalen Hurts. I never was able to get myself to bench Josh Allen. Like I just can't mentally do it. So I would go Josh Allen if he's a full health, but he's playing the Patriots.
No, his question is a week premature. Just to be clear, he's talking about week 16 when he's in the garbage toilet bowl. So this week they don't play the Patriots. It's next week he's talking about.
Okay, so this is for next week. I didn't catch that, but either way, now that I'm considering the matchup, I mean, maybe Allen's healthy by then, but yeah, I would agree with Gabe. Go Dak.
Yeah, I'm going Dak. The Cowboys are rolling. They want to finish first in the division and they want to beat a division rival all day. I don't see them slowing down. And we saw what happened. They might not have the windy conditions, but the Patriots are different. I don't want to bet against them. And Dak is a monster in his own right.
No, that's a good point. You know, in general, I don't like nobody has Mahomes and Allen, you know, in a one quarterback league, but like, so, you know, normally your other option isn't as good but I can never come to benching Josh Allen, but that's a good example of a time you can. I would lean Dak on that, especially, you know, if you're desperate for a win there. But it looks like you're fighting for last place, if that's what you're referencing with the toilet bowl thing. All righty. Well, that should do it for this episode of the First Round Fantasy Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. We truly do appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll be back next week with more of our crew here to discuss week 2 of the fantasy playoffs or week 16 of the NFL season. Thank you for joining me, Justin. I'm your host, Jacob Bartley. You can find us on all social media platforms at First Round Fantasy. And if you're on YouTube, we finally have our custom URL. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find us on youtube.com/First Round Fantasy. That feels so good to say. Come subscribe if you're listening on the audio platforms, or if you're watching the YouTube video, go to your podcast platforms and subscribe there as well. I like listening to the audio version of our podcast when I'm driving and stuff like that. So you should do the same. Thanks again, Justin. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you guys next time.